Hi everybody, I hope you're well and enjoying the approach to the summer solstice very soon now. We're going to move on with our study of the balance of opposites, and this time it's going to be specifically light versus dark, or revealed versus hidden occult. Sorry if the title is a little weird. I wrote it kind of weird, which is why I read it kind of weird. Anyway, if you've ever studied comparative religion at all, you know the two main types, of course, revealed religions and natural religions. Revealed religions claim to be given by God directly to one special man who then reveals it to everybody else. Natural religions arise from just human reasoning and often heavily involve nature. Imagine that. The occult, when I grew up, referred to anything satanic in origin. And that, for my parents, included everything other than the brand of specific toxic Christianity embraced by the leadership of their church cult. Satanic panic in the 80s was in full swing. I lived all the way through that, and that was when Cabbage Patch dolls were possessed, and everybody was paranoid about everything. I recall several times actually during my childhood, my parents threw out my favorite toys. The one that hurt them most was my collection of 72 My Little Ponies, all of whom I loved. And they had the show stable. I had the show stable and the dream castle for them to live in. So that was quite a blow for my small self. And then even worse, actually, when I was 16, the stuffed panda that I had slept with since I was less than a year old. And the reason was because I loved them too much. And that meant that I worshipped them as idols. And with the stuffed panda in particular, my mom really thought it was possessed. And it was due to all of this fear and panic. It was a general atmosphere of distrust and paranoia. So imagine my surprise then, as an adult, learning in nursing school that the actual definition of occult is not even spiritual. All it is it means hidden. That's it. And a medical example is kind of gross, but just, occult blood in the stool. That's pretty common, which just means that there is hidden blood that they have to send the poop to a lab and test it in order to find the blood. So it's hidden. That's it. So to boil it down, I grew up in this revealed religion, which put itself in opposition to literally everything outside of itself, including other Christian churches, other Christian denominations. None of them were acceptable. Catholics were especially despised. They were often called pagan light, actually, which I now consider a compliment. And I think that's actually pretty true. It has a good reason behind it. Anyway, so to boil it down, revealed versus hidden, true faith versus the occult, from the perspective of many adults at the time, including my parents even more than most. So ultimately, that is light versus darkness, at least in their minds. And all humans, of course, we tend to instinctively fear the dark, and that springs from our inability to see what's around us in the darkness, of course. We're in the unknown without light, and humanity is deeply terrified of the unknown, which is certainly not without reason. And that primal sort of fear actually served our ancestors very well when they had to survive in the wilderness. And thanks to them and their fear of the dark, we are now here. So it's not a bad thing necessarily. We just need to understand where it comes from And then Bible verses. Any sacred text can be used to say anything that someone wants to say. And it's not the Bible's fault, but Bible verses like this one exacerbate the instinctive fear of the dark that we all have. And it's a famous verse. It's 1 John 1:5. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. And then, of course, verse 6 continues to alienate everyone who walks in darkness, which is outside the light. So, of course, the narrow interpretation by fundamentalists is anyone who isn't in their church or who doesn't believe as they believe is walking in darkness and has no light. So they tend to go to extremes. You're either all in the light or all in the dark. And that's really not what we see around us in our reality. Just consider, really, what is light without darkness? What is it? We fear the dark because it blinds us. But light without form or feature is at least equally blinding. At least. Ursula K. Le Guin, who is one of my favorite authors, she said in her amazing Wizard of Earthsea book, to light a candle is to cast a shadow. Can't have one without the other, as I keep saying. Sorry for being a broken record on that. But we need both light and dark in order to see. It's the interplay of the light with the darkness that grants us a clarity of vision so we can decipher and perceive what's around us. It gives us clarity of vision. So one without the other is equally featureless, but the blindness that comes from too much light can actually become permanent. Whereas, which is why, you grow up and your parents are always saying, don't look at the sun, because it could cause blindness. And the blindness that comes from the dark, on the other hand, gives us this even greater sensitivity to what the light reveals when it enters the dark. And that's actually a huge part of the Druid holiday at the winter solstice, when we embrace the longest, darkest night of the year. And we literally sit in the dark like a fetus in the womb. And at long last, we wait until at long last the sun rises and brings with it the return of light and clarity. But periods of darkness are just as necessary for life to grow as death is necessary to sustain it, which we talked about last time. Sorry, I lost my place. Darkness, darkness in nature is actually often nurturing. It allows strength to grow until it's ready to go out into the wider world, illumined by both light and shadow. In moderate zones, where the 4 seasons are the most distinct, which is my favorite, by the way, winter is a time that looks like death, but is not. It's very far from death, actually. Deciduous trees at that time are leafless, but they're not dead. They just look dead. Instead, they are focusing all of their energy on their roots, on growing stronger, gaining strength in their foundation. Why? So they can withstand the storms that summer brings with all its light and heat. Animals like bears in the winter are in their deep, almost comatose sleep of hibernation, which I really often envy as I'm getting older, and I'd love to hibernate for months on end. But it mirrors also the gestation of a baby, fed and strengthened within that warm, dark, safe world of the womb. And similarly, we sit in the darkness of the earth's womb, the mother goddess, and are reborn each year. Seeds must begin their growth in darkness. Essentially, so by by all these examples, we see that each stage of life that's most vulnerable is protected by the dark in all species, flora and fauna alike, plants or animals. They begin in the dark, where it's safe and protected. And when they're strong enough, that's when they enter the light. So we fear the dark, but looking at it this way, we see that it often brings us the gift of the greatest safety that we're going to know in a dangerous world. Which is not to say that nothing bad can happen in the dark, certainly. That's another, you guys know. I don't have to explain everything. But we did come to this understanding naturally, that the darkness is to be feared. And at this point, we're coming to the concept of the shadow self. And most of us know, of course, that there is both light and darkness in all human beings. The place that we make a mistake is when we, I can tell my hair is going nuts. Okay, so where we make our mistake is when we equate the darkness with evil. We give it a moral quality, and we equate the light with good. Light and dark do not have moral qualities in and of themselves. They're like emotions that way, which we'll talk about more later. We understand, though, that darkness has this reputation, partly because what do we hide in the dark? Usually we hide the things that we're ashamed of in the dark, or the things we don't use. If it's a physical dark, the attic or the basement, we put Christmas decorations down there when, it's the warmer seasons. And it's the same in our soul. We hide the things that we don't want to see all the time. We hide them in the darkest crevices of our soul, the things that we're afraid for others to see or to know about us. And those things, we think of them as bad, but they're not necessarily. Our fears, our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities, and our wounds from the past, we hide them in the dark because they need to heal, and we know that instinctively. But they are not bad, even though we hide them from ourselves. But hiding them from ourselves is what makes us imagine them to be what they're not: evil, monstrous, etc. Darkness actually grants that safety and security. It grants privacy, and it can be a place of healing if we let it. So how do we do so? How do you learn to find your way in physical darkness? You have a couple options. First, you can bring a light with you, however tiny, to give it some shape. Light and dark together are, again, what give form to everything around us and within us. Face what you hide in your deepest places, no matter how afraid you are of what you might find. The second option, don't bring a light. You can grope your way around, and in any place, if you do that enough, you're going to be familiar with the nooks and crannies of any space, just by touch, sound, your other senses perceiving little things in the dark. And actually that can be a way to know a space better than just by looking at it. It's the same in the inner world with your soul. If you don't want to shine a light on it, fine. But spend some time there getting to know the space and what's in it. Blindness doesn't have to be a handicap if you learn to work with it, through it, or around it. In either case, whichever option you may choose, the antidote to fearing what is hidden there is to gain a thorough knowledge of it, whatever form that knowledge takes, to embrace it and then to show it love. If you find ugliness within your soul, and you will, if you're honest, we all do if we pay attention, the way to conquer it and to make it serve you, to serve the greater good, is to show love to the part of yourself that gave it birth. For example, Do you have prejudice or hatred even toward a group of people or even one person for any reason, justified or not? We all do, if we're honest, again, at least once in our lives. So confront it. Why do you hate? Because of either fear or pain or both. You were badly abused by a drunken parent. You grew up to hate. Okay, no one can blame you for that. Nor should you blame yourself. And blame, as I've said before, is pointless. Yields no fruit. But your hate will consume you if you don't make it serve you. And you will end up quite unjustly hating everyone who reminds you of the abuser for any reason. Even if it's a shallow reason like the shape of their face or the color of their hair. I have experience with this clearly. And then you're just perpetuating what you hate within yourself. So, of course, conventional wisdom, we all know, tends to advise forgiveness of the abuser or the wrongdoer. Yet a sense of justice often stands in the way of that. And that's not wrong. Hang on. Yeah, so our sense of justice may prevent that. And it's not wrong to be angry, even furious at injustice and its perpetrators. And anger wielded properly is a powerful tool for change. It has been throughout our history. Whether it's in one soul or in a whole society, it brings change when it's used properly, not violently. Emotion, just like light and darkness, has no moral quality inherently. It's neither good nor bad in and of itself. All our emotions are there to serve a purpose of some kind for the greater good. When emotion comes out of a place of love instead of fear, then, it's coming from a place of understanding instead of ignorance. And then it's a power for good, including anger or sorrow. Your actions are informed by your emotions, so make sure that they have their roots in love and not in fear. Forgiveness can come naturally, very often, with healing, but it's not something that can or should be forced at all. Forgiveness is a gift of grace that we are free to give if and when we so choose. As such, it should not be treated by either the offender or the offendee as an obligation. If you treat it as an obligation, you're going to resent it. And you're going to resent the fact that you have to forgive over and over and over. And I've been there too. It's not an obligation. You're not required to forgive what's unforgivable. You are not required to forgive the unforgivable person. You are required to grow and to heal to the point that you can deal with those unforgivable actions from those unforgivable people from a place of love, which may include anger, quite appropriately. And again, appropriate expressions of anger do not include violence, ever, toward the self or toward others. And get that clear right now. We don't owe anyone forgiveness, and by the same token, no one owes it to us either. Even when we've apologized sincerely, even when we think that what we did was really not so bad, or at least not badly meant. And I have some personal examples. Again, I do love my parents, but I have not forgiven them for the pain and the abuse of growing up in a cult, which did include sexual assault when I was 11 years old. And why not? Why don't I forgive? It's because they have not recognized their fault, and they have not allowed a real change to begin. they still believed that that cult was right, was justified. My mother has told me that it was good for her. Um, and I understand where she's coming from, but because I love them, I can't forgive that until they realize that a change must come for their own sakes as well as everyone else's. So, since they haven't allowed a change to begin, they haven't acknowledged where the wrong actually lies, uh, they would just repeat the same evil again if given the chance because of that. And that is not okay. And I serve no one by saying that it is. It would not be ultimately loving even toward them to accept their fear, which is what led to their hateful exclusivist beliefs. There's this fear, which in turn led to their actions that caused so much pain for me as a child. Acceptance of that without a change, without a turnaround on their part, would be another betrayal of the child I was, who still lives within me. That is unacceptable from a viewpoint of love. And turnabout is fair play as well. My children do not owe me forgiveness for my wrongs, for my failures, for when I fell into addictions and this horrible spiral of self-pity, which really involved abdicating all of my normal responsibilities to them and to everyone. I am deeply sorry for it now, and I have changed my behaviors, so that's good. Nonetheless, I have done damage, and there are still consequences for that. And the vital part for me is that I have forgiven myself so that I can move on, chastened, and hoping that I have learned those lessons well enough now that I will never, ever need to repeat them. So the key is to love that part of yourself that learned to hate because of pain, because of fear. Tell your past self, your inner child, your alter ego, whatever, it was not your fault you were hurt. Your fear and anger is a natural response, and it does not make you wrong or evil or even weak. It makes you natural. I accept your feelings. You are part of me, and I love you, and your ultimate healing informs my actions. I know it can seem really weird to talk to yourself, but it really helps. It helps psychologically. If you don't believe in a spirit world, it can help emotionally and mentally. Just to acknowledge that part of yourself that's still cowering in the dark, afraid. So that that dark part of your soul, which we all have, when you bring love to it, unconditionally, it will heal. It will finally grow whole and healthy. Yes, and that will be in the dark at first, until it's strong enough to be brought out into the greater world of light and shadow, transformed. Love and blessings to all of you, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.